Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to get working on the value design assignment. This is broken up into two parts. You're going to create a value scale, and then you are going to do some research and create an illustration in the style of Stuart Davis. So first, a value scale. You've probably done these sorts of things if you've taken any other art classes, where you start with the darkest dark and the lightest light, and then you create steps in the scale to create a range of values. With this assignment, you can stick with just black and white, or if you want, you can create a color and work with a color. Your ultimate design will be a monochrome piece that is just focuses on the lights and darks of a particular color. To get started in it in Photoshop, you're going to download the template. We have this simple value scale up here and then space for you to create your design. Now, the easiest way to do this in a value scale, you can try manually figuring these all out and start with sort of the blackest black and the whitest white and pick some intermediate color and work on lights and darks in between. Um, I'm going to go easy and cheat a little bit and let the tools help me out. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to use this marquee tool, which is the little dashed box. And down here, not on the value scale, but down here in this area, I'm just going to draw a box. Just this is going to be a temporary box that we're going to use to create a gradient. I have a black to white gradient, which I could easily just use and just click and drag and get a grayscale. If I wanted to use a different color, I can pick, just so you see it, if I pick this area up here, the little gradation, I can go through and there's some pre-made gradients that you might find. Or down here in this bar here, we can change the colors that we want to use. So if I start on the left and say, you know what, I want my base color to be a dark red, burgundy color, and that I'm going to fade to white. So that gives me the range, and I will get a range of reds and light reds. There we go. So that works. Now I want to create a new layer where I'll create my actual value scale. And what I'm going to do is use this marquee tool again and draw for my first box. Draw around that first box. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, which looks like this little rubber eyedropper, right? I'm going to use that and I'm going to sample a dark color down here. And that will fit in here. And I can use a paintbrush. And since that is selected, I can just do a quick fill. I can be sloppy because it's only going to be constrained within that box. Then I can move along and draw more boxes. Eyedropper. And what I'm going to do is sample a color that's sort of just below that box. So somewhere in this range, roughly sort of in the center, I will get a lighter color. I can then color in. Work my way along, and you'll start seeing that we start getting a range of colors. That one's just a little bit lighter than the first one. This one will work its way down. I didn't do a great selection, but you'll get the idea. Paintbrush, right? Select, deselect if I ever want to just turn off my selections. You can start seeing that I'm going to start getting a range of lights to darks, building my value scale. I'm just skipping ahead a little bit just to get a few of these. You can kind of figure out the pattern that I'm going for here of what you're going to be doing. I'm actually going to, instead of picking white down here, I'm going to pick a lighter color. I guess it's a darker color than white, but I'm going to pick over on this side a little bit. So instead of getting pure white, when I get to coloring it, it's going to look mostly white, but not quite, right? And then that gives you a nearly white, but still has a bit of that same dark or same red tint to it. Now that I have this, pretend I did all of those. There you go, that's part one. So that gives me, part A, I guess, for the assignment, but that gives me a value range, and the gradient can then go away. Now part two, part B to the assignment, you're going to try creating an illustration in the style of Stuart Davis. He was active from like the 19 teens all the way until the 60s. And this is one of his more famous ones in color. You'll see it in a sec. He did a lot of stuff with jazz and improvisation. A lot of his artwork, actually, I have one here. A lot of his artwork, at first glance, looks very wild and very chaotic, which kind of is, right? But it's not random. There's a point to what he's doing. He's playing with shape. He's playing with color. He's trying to capture a mood, and so definitely you guys can see that jazz influence, right? Bold shapes, bold marks, high contrast. Um, and a lot of times he had bits of text, right? So he was actually painting letters and numbers into these, is trying to capture some sort of essence of something. I particularly like the swing landscape one. And at first, it looks like a chaos of colors, but as you start looking, you start seeing that it is indeed a landscape. There's buildings, there's a lighthouse down here, there's a boat, looks like some dockyard stuff, maybe some factories going on here. So you can see a smokestack and some smoke coming up. There's a buoy here. So there's actual elements. They're very abstracted, simplified. Um, Again, bold colors, bold contrasts, things moving around, right? There's not a lot of straight lines. Things don't go up and down just right. But even within that, you start seeing that there's certain shapes. If you see sort of this blue shape becomes almost like a sky, and then there's another shape that builds off of that that becomes this sort of block, and then within that block there's stuff. There's also a nice big block here with stuff happening in it. So lots of layering, um, lots of sort of shapes within shapes that build up to create bigger shapes, but yet things break out of those shapes. A lot of fun to look at his stuff. So while you're working, I really recommend listening to some wild and crazy music, right? Pull up a playlist of some jazz or whatever music you listen to that's got a lot of variety and beeps and boops and bounces to it, and see if that helps inspire you. And you do not need to make them super wild and crazy, right? Some of his are very wild. That's that one that you saw on the grayscale on the class site. Um, some of these are a little bit simpler, a little more subdued, right? But even that, there's still some action and movement. So it's just a salt shaker. You're looking maybe at the side, you're looking at the top, right? This is opened up. So you could kind of look inside. There's another one inside here. There's a lot of movement and a lot of energy, even though it is sort of quiet and subdued. Kind of like this one, I really like as well. It's very quiet and subdued, but still has a lot of energy to it, right? So we have a house and a street. So there's sort of the side of a building with a sign. There's a some how or windows. There's some ladders up, but even that, a lot of this isn't exactly straight. There's things layered on top of each other, and then we get to the street. It looks like maybe an overpass that we're under, and there's some garages layered back depth, right? So it's an urban environment. You can see all the way back. Um, yeah. So take what you can from these, spend some time looking at them, listening to some music, doing some more exploring and looking at some of his other stuff. There's a lot here to look at. Even some of his earlier stuff, we don't want you emulating just this kind of stuff, but you can see where that was a foundation to start building up to the more abstracted stuff. So it's kind of cool to see that evolution as an artist. I would like for you guys to work in those forms. In Photoshop, I'm going to create a new layer, and I can use that eyedropper and just sample some stuff. Right. With this one, I recommend working on a lot of layers. Start building with bold marks. So I'm going to say, let's use that one. Paintbrush, I want to use a sharp edge, 100% hardness. And I'm going to start maybe just by drawing, using my shift click trick and draw a box here and fill this in. Actually, maybe I want to do it at an angle because his stuff always had sort of angles to it. Right. A little bit bigger just so it's easy to fill for now. I'm going to go smaller, maybe another layer. This time I want maybe a lighter tone that I can take from. And here I'm going to start a smaller shape that follows somewhat of an angle. Right? Maybe that one's a little bit more of a shape like that. I think you guys can start figuring where I'm going to go with this, right? And I have honestly no idea what I'm illustrating. Maybe if we had a point, right? I like the idea of a landscape, so I'm going to start building a landscape. So maybe this is a building that's closer. I can make this a little sloppy, it doesn't matter. His style is very loose, so if I want to loosen it up a bit again. If I got a big building there and I got another one that's layering back, maybe, what the heck, let's just have another building over here, and let's make this one very tall. And he used a lot of repetition, so maybe there's actually another building or set of stacks over here, right? That kind of idea. And I think I need like a nice light one cutting into here. Maybe I'm going to do the idea of some windows, or I guess what could pass theoretically as windows, right? New layer, brush, a smaller paintbrush, and maybe there's some windows, right? We're going off a repetition. Sometimes he had things that followed lines or shape cutting into shape, so maybe there's the door is going to be down here, or door-ish thing, right? So it's a lot of this just maybes and maybe nots, right? And then by working on separate layers, that gives me the ability to move these things around. And actually, I kind of like that, where it's starting to break out of the building and then starts overlapping here. Yeah, so simply put, that's the idea, is to start exploring patterns or start exploring repetitions. Maybe these things are also going to be some sort of window, but I want a darker, which I think is, let's go with this dark one over here. New layer, and I'm going to just, I don't know, these are going to be some lines, right? There's something happening there. They're kind of lining up. Maybe there's a dot up there because why not? And then I want a dot here. This one's a little bit zigzaggier because cool. And right there's a dot because I want a dot right there, right? So you can build these things up, shift and play with the layers, start moving things around. Yeah, it's up to you to explore and see where it takes you. Remember that there's a system underlying this, right? So look at symmetry, in this case probably a lot of asymmetry, but look at how lines start lining up with each other. Start looking at where you have areas of high contrast versus areas of lower contrast. Start looking at how the space fills. And then when you're done, I'm being very sloppy, as you can see, around my edges, but what I'm going to do is take all of the art layers minus my template piece, take all the pieces that make up the art by picking all the layers, click the little folded post, or not, manila folder, sorry, to make a group. And with everything in the group, I can now take my marquee tool, draw a box around the art itself. And with the group selected, when I hit my layer mask, it will crop it out so that I only see everything in the box. which makes a nice clean cutout for our picture, nice and refined. And ultimately what you'll do is turn in something like this with your artwork finished, with your steps that you've sampled your colors from, with a gradation from dark to light to capture your value scale. There you go. Have fun. Again, listen to some music and get lost in the designs.